evening and thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Nick Blumberg. The Chicago Public Schools CEO is hit with a congressional subpoena. Macquline King is summoned to testify as part of a wave of anti-trans and anti-DEI efforts. This as the district announces a $730 million budget gap. Mayor Brandon Johnson reflects on 3 years in office as he continues to face down a combative city council. Plus, Johnson joins Governor J.B. Pritzker and other local leaders to try and land another Democratic National Convention. Joining us to discuss those stories and more is our Week in Review panel: Jeff Buchholz of WBBM News Radio, Carrie Shepard of Axios Chicago, Francia Garcia Hernandez of Block Club Chicago, and Mitchell Armentrout of the Chicago Sun-Times. Thank you all for being here.
Sure.
Let's get right to it. So, Jeff, as we just mentioned, Macquline King has been summoned to testify in Congress. What are the details there?
So the chairman of the House Education and Workforce Committee, Republican Tim Walberg from Southern Michigan, said this week that he has invited or tried to invite Dr. King to come and testify about the district's, what we can gather to be the district's policies dealing with gender identity and expression. This is part of the Republican Party's and the Trump administration's attempt to sort of do away with policies that are geared toward that sort of issue. And in fact, the Chicago public school system is under a federal civil rights investigation for those policies as well. And Representative Walberg has said that he's offered 6 dates to Dr. King and has not gotten a response. So he said, you know, I've never had to issue a subpoena as the committee chair before, but the American people deserve answers. So he has summoned her, has issued a subpoena for her to testify June 10th, along with school leaders from Virginia and San Francisco, to talk about this very topic.
Yeah, of course, congressional Republicans have been going after that Black Student Success Plan that CPS has. You know, Carrie, do you think this might be somewhat similar to what we saw when Mayor Brandon Johnson testified last year? You know, a lot more heat than light necessarily.
Yes, exactly. I think it's just that. I think it's a lot of political theater. I mean, this is, as we've all said, this is what the Trump administration has been going after. The CPS, but also schools across Illinois. I just reported a couple weeks ago that DOJ is investigating 36 schools in Illinois for supposedly gender identity. And we should be clear that, you know, access to facilities that match gender identity for students, that is protected by law in Illinois. So CPS isn't really breaking state law. And some would say it also is protected by federal law in Title IX. It's just an interpretation issue. So I don't think anyone's really clamoring to go to a congressional to testify in front of Congress. So I can understand why Dr. King, and you know, especially she's got a big budget hole to fill, so I'm sure she has plenty of stuff on her plate and not going to DC.
Yeah, Mitch, how about those budgetary issues? More than $730 million. We just heard from the district. How do we know, what do we know about how they plan to respond to that gap?
Well, it sounds like it's bad news in terms of just removing teachers from certain schools. I believe that elementary schools are trying to limit it to 4 teachers per school. They're trying to keep those cost cuts as far away from students as possible, they say. But $732 million, I mean, it's hard to keep anything far away from students at that high of a cost. And you know, it's a cliff that we've seen coming for a long time here, with COVID-19 relief dollars drying up and just other federal funding cuts across the board. So it's, yeah, trying times at CPS.
Yeah, you know, we saw school board members this week, Francia, you know, lobbying state lawmakers saying you should be spending more money on schools, not worrying about economic development for the Bears. You know, it seems like a fairly logical argument, but given all the focus that lawmakers have had on keeping the team in Illinois, do you think that might break through in Springfield?
That's an interesting question. I don't think so at this point. You know, for CTU to advocate for more money, I think the governor's office has been very clear that that's something that's important, but there's just not money for that, and that's been announced for years now. I think lawmakers are interested in funding education, and everybody is, but the money needs to exist. They can't just create it out of nowhere. It's also interesting because that budget hole with the $732 million-ish is without counting paying back the pension payments to the city, and that's counting on a TIF surplus that would come to the CPS, but if that changes and the city has also different budget priorities and gaps, then we could see a bigger gap for CPS.
A lot of unanswered questions there, and maybe not great answers coming for the district. All right, Jeff, you sat down with Mayor Brandon Johnson as he marks his 3rd anniversary in office. What did you hear from the mayor?
I heard a little bit of conversation about the Bears. We also heard a lot about his plan to visit the Vatican and meet with Chicago's very own Pope Leo XIV coming up here at the end of the month. He says I'm going to bring him a message of gratitude for his moral clarity. He's apparently also going to bring a Cubs cap and possibly a jersey as well.
Feels like sacrilege.
Well, yes, of course, because of course the prelate-born Robert Prevost on the south side of Chicago is by birthright a White Sox fan. When I asked, when we talked a little bit about his plans to run for re-election, he says he has not made a decision, and there'll be time to do that. I did point out, well, you meeting with the Pope would actually make a pretty decent campaign ad. And he said, well, what would make a really good ad is Cubs and Sox fans getting together, and that's, peace in our time, I suppose. I don't know. Might be putting a lot on a visit, but we talked a little bit about that. We talked about the Bears. He continues to say that the best place for that team is on the lakefront. With the plan that he and Kevin Warren, the CEO of the Bears, rolled out 2 years ago to remake the entire museum campus around a publicly owned domed stadium for the football team. And I asked him if he thought that message was getting through to lawmakers, and he said, I will tell you that there have been people in the House and Senate who have thanked me for raising those issues because they had raised them in caucus meetings and didn't get any answers. Now, we heard today from the folks at Crane's Chicago Business, from Justin Lawrence, friend of this show, that the mayor is pitching this idea that the city would take more control of the Illinois Sports Finance Authority, which is the entity that controls Rate Field, as a way to keep the Bears in the city. And this proposal apparently was floated without any consultation with the governor's office. A lot of folks in Springfield don't know what this is. And of course, the legislature is done May 31st. So its prospects seem not great.
Yeah, that's a big lift with the clock ticking.
I would say that's a no-go from probably the state.
Yeah, I would imagine so. One of the big themes that helped define some of Mayor Johnson's last 3 years is, of course, the immigration blitz, Operation Midway Blitz. Francia, there was a lot of anticipation this week about the possibility of a special prosecutor getting appointed to look into immigration agents' actions. What ended up happening?
Well, the court ruling was expected Monday, but it got delayed. It is now expected on May 21st. This was because the defendants entered more evidence. The Illinois Public Accountability Commission released a report at the end of April that really disclosed all of the federal government's actions here in Chicago, and they wanted to include that as part of the evidence, the factual evidence of the federal government's actions in Chicago and alleged violations of the law. So that was entered. The state's attorney's office responded to that, and now they gave an opportunity to the defendants to again respond, which was expected today by 5 p.m. With all of that information, the judge is expected to make a decision and a ruling on May 21st. Groups keep pushing for a special prosecutor to be appointed. As they say, the office of the state's attorney has a conflict of interest because she has had plenty of time to investigate alleged violations, and 9 months later she has not. But it's also a matter of seeing what really would happen. The Illinois State Police launched an investigation into the shooting of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, one of the immigrants who was killed by federal agents at a traffic stop in Franklin Park. So it's unclear whether that could also have any influence on the decision.
And indeed, the state's attorney, Eileen O'Neill Burke, has said consistently, we'll prosecute anything that a law enforcement agency brings to us to investigate. And I'm not sure from her standpoint whether the Illinois Accountability Commission qualifies as a law enforcement agency because it doesn't have subpoena power, or didn't have subpoena power, I should say. The state police getting involved with the death of Mr. Villegas Gonzalez changes that complexion a bit.
That is one step forward for progressives who say, yes, that the state's attorney hasn't done enough to, to prosecute this. But we should be clear also, if indeed it does get a special prosecutor, then what do the feds do with it? Does it have enough teeth? for federal agencies to take action, we don't know yet.
Yeah. All right, switching gears, Carrie, local lawmakers rolling out the red carpet for the DNC site selection committee. Does it seem likely they would pick Chicago for a second convention in a row?
I was very skeptical, but now that I know, someone else called me skeptical today too. I said, that's my job. I think there's precedent now that we know that this has happened before in Chicago, that there have been back-to-back. 2024, that was a big win for the Democrats. It was a big win for Governor Pritzker. The DNC, the city didn't have any debt from that. It's interesting too because, are we going to see Governor Pritzker running for president on that year? Would it be, that would be quite the moment, right? That he is hosting the DNC when he is running for president, or will it be former Mayor Rahm Emanuel? This is all being figured out. I think that it is more likely than I thought. I'm always a little skeptical, to use your word, of I think we all saw this in reporting a little bit, that there would be this surge of economic, restaurants, everything around there, and we didn't quite see that pan out as much as promised. That's the case with a lot of events.
Right.
We saw that with NASCAR as well. So we'll see. I obviously, I think the governor wants it, but we're not in a swing state is the other part of that, where the cities we were competing against are in swing states.
Although it did come, debt-free to, for taxpayers.
Absolutely.
So that's something at least.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course, yeah.
All right, Mitch, jumping back to the Bears for a minute. One of the selling points of this mega project bill that the state Senate passed has been some property tax relief measures. But there's an analysis out there that found that they might not actually go very far.
Yeah, it sounded great. As long as you're helping out a big money team that's worth $9 billion, why don't we try and help out average homeowners at the same time? Right. Unfortunately, the bill that passed the House really doesn't do all that much. It might save the average homeowner a buck or two, depending on the number of giant projects that move through Illinois. It's got a lot of lawmakers in Springfield trying to pare down the legislation that they've now got about 2 weeks to make something happen here and try and keep the Bears from moving to Indiana. Whether or not you believe they're entirely serious about that, I'll leave that up to you. But this whole time, for 5 years now, we've kind of been talking about the optics of handing state help to, again, a $1 billion franchise. Do they need that help? We've already given a lot of help to help them renovate Soldier Field. Yeah. We're still paying for that to the tune of $500 million that are still owed on that. But at the same time, there are a lot of jobs and business tax dollars on the table. If those cross the state line, J.B. Pritzker doesn't want to wear that jacket, sure. And no Chicago Democrat does. So there's still momentum for that to happen in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. All right, Carrie, sticking with Springfield for
Sure.
a minute, you've been covering a bill aimed at keeping abortion care records private. What are the details there?
So this would segregate your medical records that identify if you've had abortion care here, and also gender-affirming care. These are both rights that are protected in Illinois, not so much the case in neighboring states like Indiana, for example. So it would be on the onus of the patient that whether they share this, if they come to Illinois, which meant a quarter of all out-of-state abortions in 2025 happened in Illinois. We have a history of strong reproductive rights here. This is a huge issue for the governor. So if you come to Illinois for that care and return back to your state where it's criminalized, you don't have to share with a healthcare provider that you received an abortion. That information it's on your medical record, but it's segregated out. The pushback would be, well, what if there are health concerns? Well, doctors that lawmakers consulted said that any complications from an abortion are present as complications to a miscarriage as well and can be treated the same. I checked with experts on that. They said that's true. Thus, a patient wouldn't have to reveal that information and they could still get the treatment they needed. This is just in committee. This is not probably going to pass in the next 2 weeks, but I would say that there is strong support in a state like Illinois for something like this.
Absolutely, it's really sort of planted its flag as a place that folks can come for care.
Yes, and we should say the gender affirming care part is very important because we've seen in other states that, say in custody battles,
sure.
one parent will use it against another parent to get custody if they disagree with gender-affirming care.
Yeah. All right, Francia, during Midway Blitz, lots of efforts both to prevent immigrants from being detained, deported, also ensuring that they still had an income. Tell us about the cycling group that's working along those lines that you reported on.
Yes, Cycling for Solidarity, it's a mutual aid collective of cyclists from all over Chicago, and they are bringing back their street vendor buyouts. So they organize these group tours where they bike to a different neighborhood in Chicago, predominantly immigrant neighborhoods, some on the northwest side, some on the southwest side, and they go and identify street vendors there. They all ride together, they shop from the vendors, and whatever is left, they buy out from them and then distribute out for free to people who are in need. They use this to support vendors who had to stay at home during Operation Midway Blitz because they were afraid of being targeted, or they did, in some cases, they went to their homes and they bought all of their merchandise there to keep them home so they didn't have to leave. So they're bringing this back just because, many of them did not work for weeks. Many of them were affected in some way or another. Many of them had a family member taken. So they're still recovering from low sales for months or weeks at a time is what organizers said. They're bringing back the series. It kicks off at the end of this month. It'll be one Saturday a month through October. They're going to visit neighborhoods like Little Village, Pilsen, Back of the Yards, all of these immigrant enclaves of the city.
All right.
I love that idea. I love that story. It's a great story.
All right, Jeff, the battle over tipped minimum wage in City Council, you thought it was over. Not quite. What was this week's development?
I'm learning that no battles are ever really over at City Council. The new version of this one is a proposal that would, instead of a permanent freeze on the one fair wage law that phases out the tip credit for restaurant and bar workers, would be a finite freeze of 2 years and maybe 4 years if it's a smaller restaurant that's involved. This is a proposal from Walter Red Burnett, the alderman representing the West Side, including the Fulton Market District, which, as you know, is full of hot restaurants and restaurants who are, according to them, concerned about the higher cost of everything. This has, I wouldn't say it has the support of labor groups and restaurant groups, but they each said in hearings this week that they wouldn't oppose this particular proposal. And so it passed committee and is now headed for the full council where it'll be considered next week. I asked the mayor this week if he thought he would be more inclined to support this proposal, and he said he's still looking at it, but said, I thought the 5-year ramp was fine to begin with. We haven't seen drop off in business. He's citing city data. The Restaurant Association has a different picture, but he says he's looking at it, and he says he'll work with City Council.
Yeah, these fights are never over until they're over.
Correct.
All right, Mitch, lots of questions on folks' minds about hantavirus right now, given that outbreak on a cruise ship. Illinois officials tracking a possible case in Winnebago County, but sounds like they're urging the public to remain calm right now.
Yeah, there's no imminent threat of any sort of pandemic like we saw several years ago with COVID. The good news, I guess, is that, yeah, it's very hard for this virus to transmit from a person to another person. It's really close and extended contact. And yeah, even the hantavirus that was reported in Chicago, or in the Chicago area, is a totally unrelated strain to the one that's on this cruise ship that is ported off of Spain. Apparently, I've learned a lot about hantaviruses last year. We all have, I guess. But
all became immunologists the last few years.
Right, just like there are many different types of coronaviruses, there are many different types of hantaviruses. And you don't need to worry about lining up for your hantavirus vaccinations or anything else anytime soon.
All right, thank you.
This is my hometown, Winnebago County, Rockford. I have family there, so I do not love that this is happening there.
Dr. Armentrout says we're okay.
I know,
so,
thanks, Doc.
All right, Carrie, just about a minute left, but I want to get to this. Anybody looking to buy a home right now knows the market is very tight, and some of these listings are never even made public. That's what a new lawsuit hinges on. Tell us about that.
Zillow, which we probably, if you've ever been searching for a place, or if you watch or follow Zillow Gone Wild, which shows funky houses, you know that there are listings everywhere. Zillow has pushed back against this idea of private listing networks. These are when a brokerage will, the transaction is essentially out of the public eye. Hey, I've got this house coming up. Hey, this is how much we think you can get for it. Zillow says that is not transparent. You are not giving the home buyer the full story of what's out there. They said that MRED, which is the MLS, Multiple Listing Service, it's a lot of acronyms, that serves Chicago and the Chicago area, but has now gone nationwide. Zillow claims they threatened to cut Zillow off from all the listings that are in MRED if they didn't take these private listings. So Zillow has sort of bent their listing standards a little so that they're not cut off, because that would essentially push them out of the game. If you go to Zillow and you only see a few houses versus going somewhere else and you see a bunch, it's, you know, it's about transparency basically and what's available to the home buyer.
Well, as four great reporters, you're all transparent. We appreciate that, but we are out of time. So our thanks to Jeff Buchholz, Carrie Shepard, Francie Garcia Hernandez, and Mitchell Armentrout. And we're back with a little something special right after this.
Tonight's presentation of Week in Review is made possible in part by Ann and Rich Carr, BNSF Railway, and Francine and Dr. Anthony Brown. Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by
The month of May brings with it many joys. May flowers, a chance to celebrate mothers, Memorial Day's unofficial kickoff to summer. But for diehard football fanatics, the big highlight of the month is the NFL's annual schedule release. Last night, the Bears dropped their schedule reveal video featuring wide receiver Rome Odunze showing off some artistic flair. WTTW News was there for an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at the making of the video.
Inside Bears HQ at Hallis Hall in Lake Forest, a studio crew is setting up for the shoot. They've got everything a certain beloved painter needs. A palette of vibrant colors, a series of canvases that may have been just slightly jump-started, an easel, brushes, and of course, a squirrel. All right, any guesses?
I'm so glad you could join me today. I've got a couple of my little friends here, a couple of little baby squirrels.
That's right. Today, Rome Odunze will be trading his usual football gear and high-intensity play for the more laid-back duds and serene attitude of public TV's legendary painting teacher, Bob Ross.
It's a fantastic day here, and I hope it is wherever you're at.
Arriving for the shoot, Rome quickly changed from casual gym clothes into the Bob Ross look and headed into the studio. But just because today's shoot had a fun theme didn't mean Rome was any less detail-oriented than he is on the field.
Do you have a shot list? A shot list? You want to see how far Bob rolls up his sleeves.
And of course, if you're going for the Bob Ross look, you have got to get the hair right.
All right, Slate. Action.
Welcome back. I'm Rome Odunze, and today we're doing a little scene of the 2026 schedule that I hope you enjoy.
Great. I like that. Take the best so far. We'll do one more.
Even though Rome's more accustomed to running routes than reading a teleprompter, he delivered his lines like a pro. Should I be worried about my job?
Be brave.
As the shoot progressed, the crew swapped out increasingly completed canvases that Rome painted with the help of some editing magic. But of course, he got a chance to show off his skills on the Bob Ross be-all, end-all.
You got my technique for the big fluffy clouds?
Doing take after take in a fast-paced shoot, Rome helped keep spirits high, even under hot studio lights.
The fans are so bright.
But getting to enjoy some Bob technique helped relieve any tension.
Let's go ahead and clean off our brush before the next step.
Just have a little fun and off you go.
And since it was the Bears, they added in some equipment Bob wasn't known to use.
Isn't that satisfying?
After the shoot, we asked Rome how it felt getting into character.
It feels good. I think most of the work goes into the fro. You know, the fro is the kind of the Bob Ross icon, but you know, it's his charm and you know the rolled up sleeves and all that, and it's happy-go-lucky sort of attitude. So I just try to embody that a little bit. Happy little trees, happy little clouds, and all that. So I'm a fan for sure.
Fans of the Bears are excited about the upcoming season. After a playoff run last year, we asked Rome what he was looking to do this season. Coach Ben Johnson's second.
Obviously, go further into the playoffs, go win a Super Bowl is the main goal. We definitely have some chemistry that we've, picked back up on, relationships that obviously have been building. So those have all continued to grow. And, under this offense and under his leadership, I think we're all kind of, on the right path.
I'd like to wish you all a happy painting and bear down, my friend.
With the Bob Ross shoot behind him, we also asked Rome if he had any ideas for next year's schedule reveal video.
I got no clue. I think I've done my service though when it comes to the team schedule release. So, hopefully I'll just have maybe a minor role.
Whoever ends up with the starring role, we've got some ideas for the theme. Sesame Street, anyone?
The Bears season opener is September 13th against Carolina. The home opener is the following week facing the Vikings. If you want to see our full interview with Rome Odunze, it's on our website at WTTW.com/news. And that's our show for this Friday night. Be sure to sign up for our free email newsletter, The Daily Chicagoan, at WTTW.com/newsletter. Now, for all of us here at the Week in Review, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay informed. Have a great weekend. All right, did any of you ever paint along with Bob?
We used some Bob Ross after last season. Remember how tense those were?
Right.
You could use
7 last-minute wins, yeah. Sure.
Bob Ross.
Yeah,
yes,
bring the
Bob
blood
Ross.
pressure down a little bit.
He did a great job.
He did. He was game.
Was he really painting those birds?
Oh yeah.
Really?
He did a fair amount of it.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You should have taken one of those canvases.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say, maybe they'll auction them off. There you go.
There you go.
That would be something.
Stadium.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Maybe this could be a pledge giveaway. We should keep this partnership going.
I love that. That's amazing.
That should go to Republic.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that serves the needs of clients in the Chicago area and throughout the nation.